Hey everyone, welcome back. Lavoie here, financial planner, and this is part 2 of our Social Security series. So in the last video, we covered the basics, when you can claim, how early or delayed filing changes your benefit, and why that decision is permanent. And so today we're going somewhere most people never think to look: the spousal, divorced spouse, and survivor benefits you may not even know that you're entitled to. So these are the benefits that get often missed, and missing them can cost you real money. So let's get into it. So what I wanted to do is a quick recap before we dive in from video 1. So we discussed claiming early, and at 62, this means a permanent reduction up to 30% of your full benefit. Delaying to 70 means up to 24% more per month in your pocket, and that increase is guaranteed, not market dependent. And for most people, the break-even point where delaying starts to pay off lands somewhere between age 78 and 80. If you haven't watched that video yet, it's worth going back to first. So let's start by discussing spousal benefits. So here's something a lot of people don't really realize, is that your spouse may be entitled to a Social Security benefit based on your earnings record, even if they never worked a day in their life, or they earned significantly less than you did. So to qualify, 2 things need to be true. One is you need to have been married for at least a single year, and the higher earning spouse needs to have already filed for their own benefit. So here's how the spousal benefit grows. At age 62, it's about 35% of the higher earner's primary insurance amount. We call that the PIA. So that percentage gradually increases the longer the spouse waits, up until their own full retirement age, where it caps at a maximum of 50%. And here is the critical part. Unlike your own worker benefit, spousal benefits do not increase past that full retirement age. The max is 50% of the higher earner's PIA, period. So there's no reason to wait past FRA for a spousal benefit. So you may be wondering and asking, well, when do benefits mature? And this is what actually trips up a lot of people. So let's try to make it crystal clear. Different benefits stop growing at different ages. Your spousal benefit stops growing at your full retirement age, not age 70. Your survivor benefit also stops growing at your full retirement age, not age 70. But your own worker benefit keeps growing all the way until age 70, adding up about 8% per year after your FRA. The number one mistake we see is a lower earning spouse waits until age 70 to file for a spousal benefit, and they're thinking in their mind they're doing the smart thing by delaying, but they're not realizing that benefits stop growing years earlier at their own full retirement age. So knowing which benefit you're claiming and when it actually stops growing matters just as much as when knowing to file. So what is a common spousal mistake that we see? So here's a hypothetical to kind of show you how this plays out in real life. So consider the scenario: Sarah and John are married. John has a much higher earnings record than Sarah. Sarah filed for her own smaller benefit at 62, and years later, when John filed for his benefit at 66, Sarah became eligible for a higher spousal benefit based on John's record. But here's the catch. She didn't know she needed to file for it, so she kept receiving her smaller benefit for years, missing out on the money that she was entitled to. So the underlying rule is universal. Once the higher earner files, the lower earner must proactively file for the spousal benefits. Social Security does not automatically switch you over, which many people sometimes mistakenly think. So how can married couples strategically plan around this? And what you want to try to do is coordinate your claims. So here's a general framework. The higher earner generally benefits from delaying as long as possible, ideally to age 70. And you may be asking why. It's because when one spouse passes away, the survivor keeps the higher of the 2 benefits, not both, the higher one. So maximizing that top benefit also maximizes the amount of protection for whichever spouse ends up living longer. The lower earner, on the other hand, might consider claiming earlier, somewhere between 62 and the full retirement age, to bring in household income sooner. So why does that work? And it's because the spousal benefit caps at 50% at FRA anyways, so there's no advantage to waiting past that point for a spousal benefit. And a common strategy that comes out of this is the lower earner claims somewhere between 62 and 65, while the higher earner waits until 70. So the result ends up becoming maximum household income along the way, which is great, and maximum survivor protection down the road. So keep in mind, be sure to consider all the available options before making a decision for your specific household and talk to an expert or a specialist. And so let's just say you were married, but you're not married. What do you do then? So for those who are divorced, they may actually be entitled to benefits based on your ex-spouse's record. So to qualify for divorced spouse benefits, 3 things need to be true. 1 is you must have been married for at least 10 years. 2 is you're currently unmarried. And finally, you're both at least age 62. So here's a real advantage over regular spousal benefits. You do not have to wait for your ex-spouse to file. If you've been divorced for at least 2 years, you can claim independently on your own timeline. The benefit works the same way as a spousal benefit. So you get up to 50% of your ex-spouse's primary insurance amount, quote unquote PIA, at your full retirement age. And one more important point, your claiming decision does not affect your ex-spouse's benefit in any way. It comes from a separate calculation. So let's shift to survivor benefits. What happens to Social Security when a spouse passes away? So to qualify, you generally need to have been married for at least 9 months, be at least age 60 or 50 if disabled, and not have been remarried before age 60. Divorced spouses can also qualify for survivor benefits if they were married 10 or more years, even if their ex-spouse remarried someone else. Here's how the benefit grows. At age 60, you'd receive about 71.5% of the deceased spouse's benefit. That percentage gradually increases the longer that you wait, capping at 100% once you reach your full retirement age. Here's the key rule to understand though. The survivor receives the higher of their own benefit or the deceased spouse's benefit, not both. This is exactly why the higher earner's claiming decision matters so much, because it directly shapes what the survivor will have to live on. So you may be asking, well, what are some strategies to consider? So here are actually 2 strategies that you could actually consider. And the goal with both is the same. Maximize total lifetime income for whichever spouse ends up living longer. Strategy 1 is you claim the survivor benefit early and at age 60, and you let your own benefit continue growing until you're age 70. Then you switch over to your larger worker benefit once you hit 70. So this really tends to work best when the survivor's own work record is strong and they expect a longer lifespan. Strategy 2 is you want to claim your own worker benefit early at 62 and let the survivor benefit grow until your full retirement age. Then switch over to the larger survivor benefit at FRA. This tends to work best when the deceased spouse had the larger earnings record. Which strategy makes sense really depends on the relative size of both the benefits, plus your own health and longevity expectations. So you want to be sure to consider all available options before making any decisions here, because this is exactly the kind of comparison worth running the actual numbers on. So let's just say, what if you filed and now you're having second thoughts, right? What do you do then? Well, you may actually have more options than you think. So option 1 is you withdraw your application. Within 12 months of your first filing, you can actually withdraw your claim and repay all the benefits you received so far. The effect is that Social Security treats it as if you never filed at all, which means that you can refile later at a higher age and at a higher benefit. The limitation though is this option is only available once in your lifetime. Option 2 is you can have voluntary suspension, sometimes called file and suspend. Once you're at full retirement age or older, you can suspend your benefit. So the effect is that your payments stop, but the delayed retirement credits keep accumulating until age 70. But the limitation here is all benefits tied to your record, including any spousal benefits your spouse is drawing, are also suspended. So both of these options essentially let you reset your claiming strategy if your circumstances change. So I want to address the elephant in the room here. Is Social Security going to go bankrupt? Well, here's the honest answer and why it may not change your claiming decision as much as you might think. So here's some context first. Back in the 1940s, there were about 159 workers paying in for every beneficiary receiving a check. By 1950, that had already dropped to 16 workers per beneficiary. Through the 1970s into the 2000s, it settled around 3.2 to 3.4 workers per beneficiary. In 2023's data, it's down to 2.8%. And it's projected to fall around 2.2 workers per beneficiary by 2035. So yes, the ratio has been shrinking for decades, but here's what's going bankrupt does not mean. It doesn't mean benefits drop to zero. Even without any congressional action, about 77% of scheduled benefits would still be payable, funded directly from ongoing payroll taxes, and by law, the SSA cannot operate at a deficit, which means Congress has to act before depletion actually happens. You may be wondering, well, what is Congress actually going to do about this? And history shows that the program has been adjusted many times since it started in 1935. So this isn't the first time solvency has been a concern. And here are the 6 options on the table. They could raise the payroll tax rate, which currently sits at 6.2% each for employees and employers. They could raise or eliminate the wage base. That's the income cap in which Social Security tax is collected, and it's set at about $184,500 for 2026. They could raise the full retirement age further. They could lower annual cost of living adjustments, means test benefits for higher earners, or reduce delayed retirement credits that reward waiting past FRA. And so here's some useful historical context. So in 1983, Congress passed sweeping reforms to prevent insolvency. And they did this just months before the trust fund would have actually run dry. So most experts watching this closely expect some kind of action again before their calendar year hits 2033. So given all this, really should solvency concerns change your claiming decision? Probably not. And here's why. Because first, claiming at 62 to get it while you can doesn't actually protect you. If cuts ever do occur, a reduced benefit would also be reduced further proportionately. Secondly, the math still favors running your own individual break-even analysis, regardless of what Congress ultimately decides to do. And third, it helps to focus on what you can actually control, your health, your income needs, and your spouse's situation, rather than variables that you can't ultimately predict. The bottom line is a permanent decision doesn't have to be driven by fear about solvency. One option is to make the choice that really fits your situation today and adjust down the road if legislation ultimately changes. And so I want to try to wrap this up with key takeaways from the video here, what you can take home from this and how you can apply it. So one is spouses can receive up to 50% of the higher earners benefit at full retirement age, even with no work history on their own. 2, spousal and survivor benefits stop growing at FRA, so there's no reason to wait until 70 for either of them. 3, divorced spouses married 10 or more years may qualify for benefits independently without even notifying their ex-spouse. 4, survivors have 2 strategies worth weighing in: claiming the survivor benefit early or claiming their own worker benefit early, based on which benefit is ultimately larger. 5, Social Security solvency concerns are real and worth understanding, and they're one factor among many in an individual claiming decision. When it comes to these decisions, when to claim, how to coordinate with your spouse, what to do about survivor benefits, really depend on your unique self. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, and I don't want you leaving money on the table because nobody walked you through it. If you'd like to talk through your specific numbers, feel free to book a 15-minute conversation. My name's Lavoie. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.